Foundations of Faith. The coffee shop was barely big enough for 3 tables, but Naomi loved working there. The owner, Mrs. Patterson, always saved the corner spot for her, the one with the wobbly table leg that nobody else wanted, but had the perfect afternoon light for sketching architectural designs. "Your usual, honey," Mrs. Patterson called, already pouring the dark roast into a chipped mug. "Thanks," Naomi replied, spreading her textbooks across the table. Architectural engineering wasn't an easy major, especially while working 30 hours a week between the coffee shop and weekend shifts at the hardware store. The bell above the door jingled, and Vincent Hargrove stumbled in, his dark hair windswept, arms laden with rolled-up blueprints. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, with shadows under his intelligent brown eyes that matched the coffee Naomi was drinking. "They rejected it," he announced, dropping into the chair across from her. "Said my design was too ambitious for someone without experience." His voice carried a mixture of defeat and defiance that made Naomi's heart twist. Vincent had been trying to launch his sustainable architecture firm for almost a year now. After graduating top of his class, he'd turned down lucrative offers from established companies, determined to create buildings that could generate their own energy and process their own waste. Visionary ideas, but apparently too visionary for the conservative investors of their small Midwestern town. "Let me see," Naomi said, pushing aside her own studies. She spent the next hour poring over his designs, suggesting small adjustments that might make the project more palatable to traditional investors without compromising his vision. That was how their relationship began, not with grand romance, but with shared dreams sketched in pencil over lukewarm coffee. 6 months later, they moved into a tiny studio apartment together. Naomi took a semester off to work full-time so Vincent could focus entirely on his new company, Green Arch Solutions. She believed in his vision with a conviction that sometimes exceeded his own. "You don't have to put your degree on hold," Vincent argued one night, watching her count tips from her new waitressing job at an upscale restaurant. "It's just for a year," Naomi shrugged, separating ones from fives. "Besides, your work is going to change the world. Mine can wait." When Vincent landed his first significant contract, renovating an old factory into a zero-emissions office space, Naomi organized a celebration dinner with their 4 plates of spaghetti on their fire escape, toasting with plastic cups of grocery store wine. "To us," Vincent said, his eyes reflecting the sunset. "I couldn't have done this without you." "To your brilliant mind," Naomi corrected, touching her cup to his. "I just made sure you remembered to eat." The renovation was a success, featured in a regional architecture magazine that caught the attention of Julian Blackwood, a venture capitalist with an interest in green technology. Over a dinner that cost more than their monthly rent, Julian offered Vincent enough funding to transform Green Arch from a struggling startup into a legitimate contender in the sustainable architecture field. Everything changed after that. Vincent rented actual office space, hired an assistant, then a team. Naomi finally returned to school, balancing classes with managing the books for Green Arch in its early days. They moved to a better apartment, and for a while it seemed their sacrifices were paying off exactly as they'd hoped. Vincent's passionate idealism began shifting into confident ambition. Success suited him. His posture straightened, his wardrobe upgraded, his vocabulary expanded to include terms like scalability and market penetration. Naomi watched this transformation with pride, even as she noticed he was bringing her along to fewer business functions. When she asked why, Vincent insisted it was to spare her from boring networking events while she was busy with school. "You're already doing so much," he said, kissing her forehead. "I don't want to add to your stress." She believed him, because that's what love does. It gives the benefit of doubt, even when doubt begins to cast longer shadows than faith. The day Green Arch secured its first multi-million-dollar contract, Vincent came home with champagne and a designer dress. "For tomorrow night's celebration," he explained, presenting the garment like a trophy. "All the major players will be there." The dress was beautiful, but felt like someone else's skin against hers. Standing beside Vincent at the gala, Naomi noticed how effortlessly he navigated conversations with investors and industry leaders, while she clutched her champagne flute like a lifeline, searching for words that wouldn't reveal her as an imposter in this world of wealth and influence. She didn't recognize it then, but that night marked the beginning of the end, the first hairline fracture in the foundation they'd built together. Bitter farewells, the invitation to Green Arch's 5th anniversary gala arrived in a heavy cream envelope with gold lettering. Naomi ran her fingers over the embossed logo, a stylized tree whose branches formed the outline of a building. She had sketched that logo on a napkin during one of their late-night brainstorming sessions years ago. Vincent had kept it, refined it, made it the symbol of his now thriving empire. "I thought we could coordinate outfits," Naomi suggested that evening, setting the invitation on the kitchen counter of their downtown apartment. It wasn't the cozy studio they'd once shared, but despite the upgraded square footage and floor-to-ceiling windows, it had never felt quite like home. Vincent barely glanced up from his tablet. "About that," he said, his voice carefully measured. "Julian thinks it might be better if I bring Camilla Bennett instead." Camilla Bennett, daughter of a real estate magnate, graduate of Wharton, recently appointed to Green Arch's board of directors. Naomi had met her exactly once at a company function where Camilla had looked at her with the polite disinterest one might show a waiter. "You want to take another woman to your company's anniversary celebration?" Naomi's voice remained calm, though her hands trembled slightly. "The company I helped you build?" Vincent finally set down his tablet. "It's not like that. It's strategic. Her father's connections could open doors to international markets. Julian thinks—" "I don't care what Julian thinks," Naomi interrupted. "I care what you think. What happened to the man who wanted to change the world, not just conquer its markets?" A flicker of something, regret perhaps, crossed Vincent's face before hardening into resolve. That man was naive. "This is business, Naomi. Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions." "Taking another woman to your gala is a business decision?" "You're twisting my words," Vincent sighed, running a hand through his expertly styled hair. "Look, we've been growing apart for months. You must have felt it too." The truth of his words stung worse than any lie could have. Yes, she had felt it, in the late nights he spent at the office, in the way he corrected her table manners at business dinners, in how he'd suggested she might want to update her look, to better reflect his position. "So this is it? 5 years together, everything I sacrificed for your dream, and you're just done?" Naomi's voice cracked despite her determination to maintain composure. Vincent's expression softened slightly. "You'll be taken care of course. I'm not ungrateful for your early support. The apartment is yours, and I've arranged for a generous settlement." "I don't want your money," Naomi said quietly. "I want to understand when you became someone who measures relationships in terms of strategic value." Vincent checked his watch, a Swiss timepiece worth more than Naomi's first car. "I have a meeting. We can discuss details later." He gathered his things, hesitating at the door. "For what it's worth, I do care about you. But people grow and change, sometimes in different directions." After he left, Naomi stood motionless in the silent apartment, surrounded by expensive furnishings that had never really reflected her taste. She'd been so busy supporting Vincent's transformation that she'd neglected to notice her own fading. Despite her declaration that she didn't want his money, practical reality forced Naomi to accept the settlement. She used it to finish her degree and move to a modest apartment across town, determined to rebuild her life away from Vincent's growing shadow. She hadn't planned to attend the anniversary gala, but her friend Dominic, who still worked in Green Arch's engineering department, insisted. "You helped create this company," he argued. "You deserve to celebrate its success too, regardless of what happened between you and Vincent." Wearing a simple blue dress, purchased with her own money, not Vincent's, Naomi entered the grand ballroom where Green Arch's milestone was being celebrated. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light over tables adorned with sustainable centerpieces. A scale model of the company's most ambitious project to date, a self-sustaining community in Arizona, dominated the center of the room. For a moment, pride overshadowed her heartache. This vision, born in a tiny coffee shop, had become reality. Whatever had happened between her and Vincent, that achievement remained untarnished. Then she saw him, resplendent in a tailored tuxedo, Camilla Bennett on his arm like she'd been designed to compliment him. They moved through the crowd with practiced elegance, accepting congratulations and making introductions with synchronized charm. Naomi stayed at the periphery, chatting with former colleagues who seemed genuinely happy to see her. She was working her way toward the exit when Vincent's voice amplified through the room as he took the stage for his address. Tonight we celebrate not just 5 years of Green Arch, but the vision that has guided us from humble beginnings to industry, leadership. He began, his voice resonant with practiced charisma. As he spoke about the company's journey, Naomi couldn't help but notice how the narrative had been rewritten. The story now featured Julian's mentorship as the turning point, with Camilla's strategic insights shaping recent successes. Naomi's contributions, the nights spent revising proposals, the connections she'd leveraged through her part-time jobs, the emotional support that had kept Vincent going through repeated rejections, had been erased entirely. After his speech, as guests mingled and champagne flowed, Naomi found herself face-to-face with Vincent near the bar. His expression registered surprise, then discomfort, then a strange superiority that twisted his once familiar features. "Naomi, I didn't expect to see you here." His tone suggested she'd wandered into a private club without membership. "Dominic invited me," she replied simply. "Congratulations on everything." Vincent's eyes assessed her modest dress, her lack of expensive jewelry. "Life treating you well? I heard you finally finished your degree." Before she could answer, Camilla appeared at his side, her crimson gown a stark contrast to Naomi's subdued blue. "Darling, the Westbrooks are asking about the Singapore project." Vincent nodded, then gestured between the women. "Camilla, you remember Naomi, an old friend." "Friend?" Camilla's perfect eyebrow arched. "I thought she was your ex-girlfriend, the one who used to waitress." The deliberate diminishment hung in the air between them. Vincent didn't correct her. "Actually," Naomi began, summoning dignity from some hidden reserve, "I helped found Green Arch. That logo everyone's wearing on their commemorative pins tonight? That was my design." Vincent laughed, the sound cutting through ambient conversation and drawing attention from nearby guests. "Come now, Naomi, you made a rough sketch once. My team developed the actual brand identity." He lowered his voice, though not enough to prevent others from hearing. "This is exactly why things didn't work between us. You never quite understood the difference between amateur contribution and professional achievement." The public humiliation burned worse than the private betrayal had. Faces turned toward them, expressions ranging from embarrassment to morbid curiosity. "You know what?" Naomi said quietly, setting down her untouched champagne. "You're right. I never did understand how professional achievement could make someone forget their humanity." She walked out of the gala with her head high, even as whispers followed her retreat. Outside, in the cool night air, she finally allowed herself to cry. Not for the loss of Vincent, but for the death of the man she had once believed him to be. Later that night, as she sat on the floor of her new apartment surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, Naomi made a promise to herself. She would rebuild her life not in reaction to Vincent's cruelty, but in pursuit of her own long-deferred dreams. The world of sustainable architecture had lost its appeal, tainted by association, but her underlying passion for creating positive change remained intact. The next morning, she applied for a position with Global Renewal Initiative, an international nonprofit that funded sustainable development in underserved communities. It was a junior role that would utilize her architectural engineering background while introducing her to the world of humanitarian finance. As she submitted her application, Naomi felt something she hadn't experienced in months: the quiet certainty that comes from choosing your own path rather than following someone else's. Rising from ashes, the Manila heat pressed against Naomi's skin as she exited the air-conditioned sanctuary of the Global Renewal Initiative's field office. 3 years had transformed her from a junior project analyst into the regional finance director for Southeast Asia, overseeing investment portfolios that funded sustainable development across 7 countries. "Ms. Sullivan, your driver is waiting," called Javier, the office manager. "And Mr. Reyes confirmed your meeting for 3 o'clock. Naomi nodded her thanks, checking her watch. A simple timepiece with a hand-woven band purchased from a women's cooperative GRI had funded in northern Thailand. She had 90 minutes before meeting with potential investors for a mangrove restoration project designed to protect coastal communities from increasingly violent typhoons. The car navigated through Manila's congested streets while Naomi reviewed her presentation. GRI had taught her to speak the language of finance without losing sight of human impact. Numbers on spreadsheets represented families protected, communities transformed, environments restored. This dual fluency, in both profit margins and social progress, had become her professional signature. Her phone buzzed with a message from Dominic, who had left Green Arch shortly after Naomi's humiliation at the gala. They'd remained friends, occasionally updating each other on their lives. Saw this and thought of you. Read his text, accompanied by a link to an article featuring Vincent at the opening of Green Arch's new headquarters. The building was visually stunning but had reportedly exceeded its construction budget by millions due to last-minute design changes demanded by Vincent to outshine a competitor's recent project. Naomi scanned the article, noting how Vincent's quotes emphasized the building's uncompromising luxury alongside its sustainable features. The Vincent she'd known would have prioritized function over opulence. The Green Arch she'd helped envision had been about accessibility, not exclusivity. She closed the article without finishing it. Vincent belonged to her past, and she had no desire to dwell there. The driver pulled up to the Peninsula Manila, where Naomi was scheduled to meet with representatives from Horizon Capital, a private equity firm interested in GRI's emerging markets portfolio. She straightened her linen blazer, a concession to corporate expectations while still accommodating the tropical climate. "Miss Sullivan?" The hotel's concierge approached as she entered the lobby. "Mr. Reyes and his team are already waiting in the conservatory." She followed him through the opulent hotel, mentally rehearsing key points about the mangrove project's projected returns, both financial and environmental. As they approached the meeting room, the concierge paused. "I should mention, Mr. Reyes himself came rather than sending his team. It's quite unusual." Naomi had never met Esteban Reyes, though his reputation preceded him. Founded Horizon Capital after making his first billion in sustainable technology, notorious for rigorous due diligence and ethical investment standards that exceeded industry norms. Famously private despite his vast wealth and influence. She entered the conservatory to find a solitary figure standing by the windows, gazing out at the hotel's lush garden. He turned at the sound of the door, and Naomi's prepared greeting faltered. Esteban Reyes was not the stern-faced titan of industry she had expected. Instead, a man with kind eyes and an unassuming presence extended his hand. His charcoal suit was impeccably tailored but deliberately understated. No flashy watches or status symbols, just a simple wooden bracelet that looked handcrafted. "Miss Sullivan," he said, his voice carrying traces of his Colombian heritage. "I've been looking forward to meeting you. Your reputation for financial innovation in humanitarian contexts is impressive." "Thank you, Mr. Reyes," she replied, recovering her professional composure. "Though I was expecting your team rather than you personally." A smile warmed his expression. Some investments deserve the founder's direct attention, particularly when they align with personal values as well as financial goals. What had been scheduled as a 1-hour meeting extended into 3. They moved from formal presentation to spirited discussion about metrics for measuring social impact, the challenges of quantifying preventative benefits, and innovative financing structures that could make humanitarian projects more attractive to traditional investors. "The problem with conventional finance," Esteban said as they shared a pot of tea, "is its narrow definition of return on investment. Environmental restoration and community resilience create value that extends far beyond quarterly reports, yet we struggle to capture that in terms investors understand." Naomi nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. We're trying to measure intergenerational benefits with tools designed for short-term gains." When they finally concluded their meeting, Esteban surprised her with a request. "I'm hosting a small dinner tomorrow for environmental innovators. Would you join us? Your perspective would be valuable. The small dinner turned out to be an intimate gathering of 12 at Esteban's temporary residence, a restored colonial-era home surrounded by tropical gardens. The guests included climate scientists, tech entrepreneurs, community organizers, and policy experts. Naomi found herself engaged in the most stimulating conversations she'd had in years. As the evening wound down, she found Esteban on the veranda, contemplating the night sky. "Thank you for including me tonight," she said, joining him at the railing. "It's rare to find spaces where finance and humanitarianism are discussed as complementary rather than contradictory forces. That false dichotomy has caused immeasurable harm," he agreed. "The notion that we must choose between profit and purpose is perhaps the greatest market failure of our time." Over the following months, their professional relationship deepened. Horizon Capital became GRI's most significant investor, funding projects across Asia and eventually expanding to Africa and Latin America. Esteban frequently consulted Naomi on investment strategies, valuing her unique perspective as someone who understood both the financial models and the ground-level realities of implementation. Their collaboration gradually extended beyond professional boundaries. Museum visits while both happened to be in Singapore, discussions over dinner about books they'd both read, a shared helicopter ride to a remote project site in the Philippines turned into an impromptu picnic when mechanical issues delayed their return. Neither acknowledged the subtle shift until a late-night video call to discuss a crisis with a project in Indonesia. After resolving the immediate issues, their conversation drifted to personal topics. Esteban's childhood in Medellin, Naomi's dreams deferred during her years with Vincent. "You speak of him rarely," Esteban observed, "but I sense his shadow still falls across parts of your life." Naomi considered this. "Not his shadow exactly. More like the shadow of the person I became with him. Someone who measured her worth through another's success. And now? Now I measure success by impact, not income. By relationships built on mutual respect rather than utility." She smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "I like who I've become much better." "As do I," Esteban said softly. Their relationship evolved organically after that night. Tentative at first, both wary of complications given their professional connections. But Esteban's gentle persistence and absolute respect for her autonomy gradually dismantled the protective barriers Naomi had constructed after Vincent's betrayal. Unlike Vincent, who had seen her support as something to outgrow, Esteban valued her insights, challenged her thinking, and championed her vision for humanitarian finance reform. He understood her need for independence and never attempted to overshadow her professional identity with his considerable influence. A year into their relationship, during a weekend retreat at his private island in Palawan, Esteban proposed, not with an ostentatious diamond, but with a simple band forged from recycled gold, set with a small stone recovered from a river restoration project they had jointly funded. "This represents what I hope for us," he explained as he offered the ring. "Beauty reclaimed from damage, strength formed through transformation, value that transcends conventional metrics." Naomi accepted both the ring and his proposal, recognizing in their union the possibility of partnership without diminishment. They married in a private ceremony attended only by close friends and key collaborators from their shared projects. Their honeymoon was spent visiting GRI initiatives across South America, combining Esteban's business responsibilities with their shared passion for sustainable development. Upon their return, Naomi established the Sullivan Foundation, focusing on educational opportunities for women in sustainable finance. Though Esteban provided initial funding, the foundation operated independently under Naomi's direction, supporting her vision rather than absorbing it into his existing philanthropic empire. "You've found someone who truly sees you," Dominic observed during a video call after Naomi shared news of a major grant her foundation had secured. "More importantly," Naomi replied, "I've found myself." Their life together balanced purpose with privilege. Esteban's wealth provided resources and access, but their shared values ensured those advantages served something beyond personal comfort. They maintained homes in Manila, New York, and Bogota, each serving as gathering places for changemakers rather than showcases for status. When an invitation arrived for the International Sustainable Development Awards in London, where Esteban would be receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award, Naomi checked the list of nominees in other categories. Green Arch was nominated for Best Corporate Initiative. Vincent will likely be there, she told Esteban as they discussed travel arrangements. Esteban studied her expression. Does that concern you? Naomi considered the question honestly. No, she finally answered. It feels like encountering a character from a book I read long ago, familiar but no longer relevant to my current story. Esteban smiled, taking her hand. Then we shall attend with clear hearts and celebrate all who are advancing the work we believe in, including your former partner. Naomi appreciated his generosity of spirit, even as she privately wondered if she could match it when faced with the man who had once so thoroughly dismissed her worth. Full circle moment. The Savoy's ballroom glittered with London's particular brand of understated opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast honeyed light over tables adorned with sustainable centerpieces, living arrangements of native plants that would later be donated to community gardens throughout the city. The International Sustainable Development Awards had become the premier global event, recognizing innovation in environmental stewardship, drawing luminaries from business, science, politics, and philanthropy. Naomi adjusted the sleeve of her emerald gown, a creation from a Filipino designer who used only reclaimed fabrics and employed women from marginalized communities. The dress was simultaneously elegant and ethical, much like the life she had built with Esteban. Nervous? Esteban asked, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. Not nervous, Naomi replied thoughtfully. Just reflecting on the journey. 5 years ago, I could never have imagined standing here as a nominee rather than someone's +1. The Sullivan Foundation had been shortlisted for the Financial Innovation Award, recognizing its groundbreaking work in creating investment vehicles that channeled capital to women-led environmental initiatives in developing nations. Though Naomi insisted the nomination belonged to her entire team, it was her vision that had transformed how philanthropic finance operated in previously underserved regions. Your foundation deserves this recognition, Esteban said, his voice warm with pride. You've created a model others are scrambling to replicate. They made their way through the crowded pre-ceremony reception, stopping frequently as colleagues and collaborators greeted them. Esteban was unfailingly gracious, but Naomi noticed how he consistently redirected conversations toward her work, rather than his own considerable achievements. It was during one such conversation with the Swedish Environment Minister that Naomi felt a shift in the energy around them, a subtle tension that prickled at her awareness. She turned slightly to find Vincent Hargrove watching her from across the room, his expression unreadable. He looked essentially the same, perhaps with slightly more gray at his temples, still impeccably dressed in what she recognized as a bespoke Savile Row suit. Beside him stood a woman Naomi didn't recognize, not Camilla Bennett, but someone new, with the polished appearance of someone selected to compliment rather than challenge. Vincent whispered something to his companion, then began, making his way toward Naomi and Esteban. Though years had passed since their last encounter, Naomi felt a momentary flutter of that old insecurity, the shadow of the woman who had never quite felt adequate in Vincent's curated world. She took a steadying breath, reminded herself of all she had built, and turned to Esteban. Vincent is coming over. I haven't seen him since he publicly humiliated me at his company gala. Esteban's expression remained calm, though his eyes held a protective warmth. Would you prefer to step away? No, Naomi said with quiet certainty. That chapter of my life is closed, but I don't need to hide from it. Vincent reached them, his practiced smile firmly in place. Naomi Sullivan, he said, as though savoring the surprise of finding her in such surroundings. What an unexpected pleasure, Vincent, she acknowledged with composed civility. Congratulations on your nomination. Thank you, he replied, then gestured to his companion. This is Olivia Westbrook, our new director of brand strategy. The woman offered a perfectly manicured hand and a smile that didn't quite reach her. Naomi shook Olivia's hand, then turned to include Esteban in the conversation. Before she could introduce him, Vincent continued. I must say I'm surprised to see you here. These events are typically restricted to organizational leadership. His tone carried the same dismissive superiority she remembered from their final encounter. Naomi felt Esteban tense slightly beside her, though his expression remained impassive. She placed a gentle hand on his arm, a silent request to let her handle this moment herself. Actually, she replied evenly, the Sullivan Foundation is nominated for financial innovation. Our work developing gender-responsive climate finance mechanisms has been quite successful. Vincent's practiced smile faltered momentarily. Sullivan Foundation? You started your own organization? Founded and serves as executive director, Esteban interjected, his tone conversational yet somehow leaving no room for condescension. Her microequity model for women-led conservation enterprises has transformed how impact investment operates in emerging markets. Vincent's attention shifted to Esteban, clearly trying to place him. I don't believe we've been introduced. Are you with Naomi's foundation? In a manner of speaking, Esteban replied with diplomatic ambiguity. He extended his hand. Esteban Reyes? The effect of the name was immediate. Vincent's expression cycled rapidly through confusion, recognition, and recalculation. Esteban Reyes, billionaire founder of Horizon Capital, pioneer in sustainable technology investment, and tonight's Lifetime Achievement honoree. Mr. Reyes, Vincent managed, his voice pitched slightly higher than before. It's an honor. I wasn't aware you were involved with Naomi's initiative. My involvement is both professional and personal, Esteban said, his arm moving naturally around Naomi's waist. We collaborate on numerous projects, though the Sullivan Foundation remains entirely Naomi's vision. Vincent's gaze flicked to the understated wedding band on Esteban's finger, then to its matching counterpart on Naomi's hand. His composure slipped further. You're married? 3 wonderful years now, Naomi confirmed, her voice free of the resentment or triumph Vincent might have expected. She felt only a calm awareness of how completely her life had transformed, not because she had married a wealthy man, but because she had become someone who no longer measured her worth through others' validation. Olivia, sensing the awkward undercurrents, tugged slightly at Vincent's sleeve. Darling, we should greet the minister before the ceremony begins. Vincent seemed reluctant to end the conversation, though clearly unsettled by this unexpected power shift. Perhaps we could discuss potential collaboration between Green Arch and Horizon Capital. Our new development in Singapore aligns with your investment priorities. Esteban's smile remained polite but non-committal. You're welcome to submit a proposal through our standard channels, though I should mention that our environmental and social governance requirements have become quite stringent. The subtle rebuke was clear to everyone. Vincent's recent projects had faced criticism for prioritizing luxury amenities over true sustainability, despite Green Arch's continued marketing as an eco-conscious brand. Of course, Vincent replied stiffly. We maintain the highest standards. An announcement requested that guests begin taking their seats for the ceremony. Vincent hesitated, then addressed Naomi directly, his tone lower and uncharacteristically sincere. You look well, Naomi. Success suits you. Thank you, she replied simply. I hope you find what you're looking for, Vincent. As Vincent and Olivia departed, Esteban gently squeezed Naomi's hand. All right? She nodded, surprised to discover she felt neither vindication nor residual hurt, just a quiet compassion for the man, who had once seemed so important to her story, but now appeared merely as a supporting character in her larger narrative. They found their table near the front, reserved for the evening's special honorees. As they settled in, Naomi glanced across the room to where Vincent sat with the Green Arch contingent. He was watching her, his expression contemplative rather than hostile. The ceremony began with an address from the United Nations Secretary General, followed by awards in various categories. When the Sullivan Foundation was announced as the winner for financial innovation, Naomi ascended the stage with composed grace. Her acceptance speech acknowledged her team, their community partners, and Esteban's support, but claimed the vision as unequivocally her own. Green Arch did not win in its category. Later, during a brief interlude before the final awards, Naomi excused herself to visit the powder room. As she was returning, she encountered Vincent alone in a quiet corridor, apparently having stepped out to take a call. "Congratulations again," he said, pocketing his phone. "Your speech was impressive." "Thank you," Naomi replied, prepared to continue past him. "Wait," Vincent said, his voice lacking its usual polished confidence. "I need to say something." Naomi paused, maintaining a comfortable distance between them. "I'm listening." Vincent nodded, accepting the implicit criticism. "Does it give you satisfaction to see how thoroughly you've proved me wrong?" Naomi considered this question carefully, recognizing its importance to them both. "No," she finally answered, "because this was never about proving anything to you, Vincent. It was about becoming the person I was meant to be, regardless of your opinion." The simple truth of her statement hung between them, neither accusation nor absolution, just a clear boundary between past and present. "Naomi," Esteban's voice carried softly from the end of the corridor. "They're announcing the Lifetime Achievement soon." "Coming," she called back, then turned once more to Vincent. "I hope you find what you're searching for." As she walked away, Vincent called after her just loudly enough for her to hear. "I think I'm beginning to understand what I lost." Naomi rejoined Esteban, slipping her hand into his as they returned to the ballroom. When he was called to the stage to receive his award, his acceptance speech focused not on his own accomplishments, but on the collective responsibility of privilege, the obligation of those with resources to create systems that expanded opportunity rather than concentrating advantage. True wealth, he concluded, his gaze finding Naomi in the audience, lies not in what we accumulate, but in what we enable others to achieve. The standing ovation that followed celebrated not just Esteban's professional achievements, but the philosophy that had guided them, a vision of success measured by impact rather than acquisition. As applause filled the room, Naomi caught Vincent, watching them, his expression a complex mixture of regret and realization. For the first time she saw him clearly, not as the titan who had rejected her, nor as the villain in her story, but simply as someone who had confused the appearance of success with its substance. In that moment of clarity, the last traces of their shared past finally released their hold on her present. Beyond revenge, the morning after the award ceremony, London greeted them with rare sunshine streaming through the suite's windows at Claridge's. Naomi stood by the glass, watching the city come alive while Esteban spoke quietly on the phone, finalizing arrangements for their foundation's new initiative, a mentorship program connecting experienced women in finance with young environmental entrepreneurs from underserved communities. "All set," he said, joining her at the window. "The first cohort starts next month." Naomi leaned slightly against him, comfortable in the shared silence that had become one of her favorite aspects of their relationship, the ability to be together without performing connection. "I've been thinking about Vincent," she said finally. Esteban waited, offering space for her thoughts without interruption. "For years, I imagined a moment like last night, standing successful before him, watching him realize his mistake." She turned from the window to face her husband. "But when it actually happened, it felt hollow." "Revenge often does," Esteban observed quietly, "even when it comes disguised as justice." "It wasn't even revenge that felt empty," Naomi clarified. "It was the realization that I'd wasted energy imagining his reaction at all, that I'd unconsciously kept him as an audience for my success." Esteban considered this. "We all carry spectators in our minds, people whose validation we still seek, even when they're no longer present in our lives." "I don't want him in my audience anymore," Naomi said with sudden certainty. "I've been building something meaningful, but part of me was still performing for a ghost." Their conversation was interrupted by Naomi's phone, a message from Dominic. "Have you seen this?" Attached was a link to a financial news article announcing a significant restructuring at Green Arch Solutions. Vincent had stepped down as CEO to become Chief Vision Officer, with day-to-day operations transferring to a career sustainability expert, previously known for criticizing luxury greenwashing in architectural projects. The article quoted Vincent directly. Green Arch began with a mission to democratize sustainable design. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that founding principle. This restructuring represents a recommitment to our original values. Naomi stared at the screen, then wordlessly passed the phone to Esteban. Interesting timing, he commented after reading the article. Do you think, Naomi began, then hesitated. Could our conversation have influenced this? Esteban returned, the phone, his expression thoughtful. Perhaps, but more likely it was the culmination of many realizations. Sometimes we need to see our choices reflected in someone else's eyes to recognize what we've become. Later that day, as they prepared to leave London for a brief visit to one of their foundation's projects in rural Scotland, Naomi received an email from Vincent. The subject line read simply, "Thank you." She hesitated before opening it, uncertain whether she wanted to maintain this unexpected connection to her past. Curiosity prevailed. Naomi, the message began, I've drafted and deleted this email a dozen times, struggling to find words that don't sound like either self-serving justification or performative remorse. The truth is simple but difficult to articulate. Seeing you last night, truly seeing you perhaps for the first time, forced me to confront what I've become. When we met, I had vision but lacked confidence. Your belief in me provided the foundation I needed to build something meaningful. But as Green Arch grew, I began mistaking external validation for intrinsic worth. The more successful we became, the more I feared being exposed as an imposter who didn't belong in the world I'd entered. Rather than acknowledging that insecurity, I projected it outward, first onto you, then onto anyone who questioned our direction. The company announced changes today that have been months in development, but our encounter accelerated my decision. I've stepped back from day-to-day leadership to refocus on the original mission that once gave purpose to my work. Whether this represents authentic growth or another performance remains to be seen, but I'm attempting to find out. I don't expect or deserve forgiveness for how I treated you. I simply wanted you to know that your words about becoming the person you were meant to be regardless of others' opinions resonated more deeply than you might have intended. Perhaps we all need to be reminded occasionally that the most important audience for our lives should be ourselves. Wishing you continued success, Vincent. Naomi read the message twice, surprised by its vulnerability. There was a time when such an acknowledgement would have meant everything to her, validation of her worth from the person who had most thoroughly dismissed it. Now, it felt like a postscript to a chapter long concluded. She showed the email to Esteban without comment. Will you respond? He asked after reading it. Naomi considered the question. I think so. Not for his sake, but for mine. To consciously close this circle rather than simply abandoning it. Her reply was brief but genuine. Vincent, thank you for your message. I believe we all face moments when we must choose between the person we've become and the person we aspired to be. I respect your courage in confronting that crossroads. The work matters more than who gets credit for it. I wish you clarity in rediscovering your purpose. Naomi. As their car navigated London's congested streets toward the station where they would catch the train to Scotland, Naomi felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with vindication. The cycle that had begun with betrayal had somehow transformed into a catalyst for growth, not just for her but perhaps for Vincent as well. You could have used this moment differently, Esteban observed. Many would have. Wielded it as a weapon, you mean? Naomi smiled slightly. There was a time when I might have, but that would only have kept me tethered to the past. The Scottish Highlands welcomed them with dramatic skies and rugged beauty. Their foundation had partnered with local communities to develop renewable energy solutions that preserve traditional ways of life while creating economic opportunities for young people who might otherwise leave for urban centers. In the small village of Glencraig, They visited a women's cooperative that crafted traditional wool products using sustainable practices. The enterprise had begun with seed funding from the Sullivan Foundation and had since become self-sufficient, even expanding to train artisans from neighboring communities. As they toured the facility, a restored stone barn where ancient techniques met modern business practices, Naomi found herself engaged in conversation with Fiona McPherson, the cooperative's elderly founder. "Before your foundation came, the young ones were all leaving," Fiona explained as they watched women of varying ages working together at looms and dyeing vats. "Nothing for them here but memories and hard winters. Now they're staying, learning the old ways but making them new again." "Your knowledge made this possible," Naomi countered. "We just provided resources." Fiona's weathered face creased in a smile. "That's the trick of it, isn't it? Knowing when to hold tight to tradition and when to let it transform, like these patterns we weave, some from my grandmother's time, some created just last month. The best future honors the past without being imprisoned by it." That evening, in the cozy warmth of a local inn, Naomi and Esteban reviewed proposals for their foundation's next funding cycle. Outside, rain tapped against ancient window panes, creating a soothing backdrop to their work. "This one," Naomi said, sliding a document across the table. "The Women's Fishing Collective in Madagascar. They're taking traditional conservation practices and adapting them to address climate impacts on marine ecosystems." Esteban reviewed the proposal. "The financial model is unproven." "So was mine once," Naomi reminded him. "Sometimes we need to fund potential rather than proof." His expression softened into appreciation. "Your instincts for identifying authentic innovation remain unmatched." Later, as they prepared for bed, Naomi found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment, not just the external success but the internal transformation it represented. "What are you thinking?" Esteban asked, noticing her contemplative mood. "About patterns," she replied. "How we weave our experiences, good and painful both, into something meaningful. Like Fiona's tapestries?" "Exactly." Naomi settled beside him, her head resting against his shoulder. "When Vincent left me, I thought my story had ended. In reality, it had barely begun." Esteban's arm encircled her. "We often mistake a single chapter for the entire narrative. The irony is that Vincent's rejection ultimately freed me to become someone I might never have discovered otherwise." She glanced up at her husband. "Though I could have done without the public humiliation part." He chuckled softly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "The universe occasionally employs dramatic methods to redirect our paths." 6 months later, the Sullivan Foundation hosted its annual symposium in Singapore, bringing together leaders in sustainable finance from across Asia. The event had grown from a small gathering of like-minded innovators into a significant platform for developing collaborative approaches to environmental challenges. During the opening reception, Naomi circulated among guests, engaging with everyone from government ministers to grassroots activists with equal attention. She was deep in conversation with a young entrepreneur from rural Vietnam when a familiar voice spoke from behind her. "Your reputation for identifying breakthrough innovations is well-deserved." She turned to find Vincent, more casually dressed than she had ever seen him in professional settings, his bespoke suit replaced by simple linen trousers and an open-collared shirt. "Vincent," she acknowledged, genuinely surprised. "I didn't realize you were attending." "I was invited to speak on the corporate transition panel," he explained. "Green Arch's restructuring has apparently become something of a case study." The Vietnamese entrepreneur politely excused herself, leaving Naomi and Vincent in a momentary island of privacy amid the crowded reception. "How is the new role?" Naomi asked, genuinely curious rather than merely polite. A smile touched Vincent's eyes, more authentic than the practiced charm she remembered. "Humbling. Stepping back from day-to-day operations has forced me to rediscover why I started Green Arch in the first place." He glanced around at the diverse gathering. "Your foundation has created something remarkable here, a true community of purpose." "That was the intention," Naomi agreed. Financial mechanisms matter, but relationships drive lasting change. They were interrupted by Esteban, who joined them with natural grace. "Vincent, good to see you again." The men shook hands with surprising warmth. "I was just complimenting Naomi on what she's built here," Vincent said. "The diversity of perspectives is impressive." "Entirely her vision," Esteban replied, his pride evident. "My contribution has been merely supportive." Vincent nodded, understanding the subtle correction. "The most valuable form of support." He hesitated, then added, "I've been learning that leadership sometimes means creating space for others' visions rather than imposing one's own." Before Naomi could respond, the symposium's director approached, requesting Esteban's presence for the official welcome. He excused himself after a reassuring glance at Naomi. "You found a good partner," Vincent observed once Esteban had departed. "I did," Naomi agreed simply. "Though that's not what defines me." "No," Vincent acknowledged. "Your work does that quite effectively." A comfortable silence settled between them, not the charged absence of words that had characterized their final encounters years ago, but the quiet understanding of two people who had moved beyond their shared history. "I should find my seat for the opening address," Vincent said finally, "but I wanted to thank you in person for the example you've set. Not just professionally but personally. You've shown me that true success lies in creating value, not just capturing it." Naomi studied him, recognizing genuine growth in his words and demeanor. "I'm glad, Vincent, for both of us." As the symposium proceeded over the following days, Naomi observed Vincent engaging thoughtfully with participants from diverse backgrounds, listening more than speaking, asking questions rather than making pronouncements. The arrogance that had once defined him had been replaced by an attentive humility that seemed to be earning him unexpected allies. On the final evening, as participants gathered for a closing dinner along Singapore's waterfront, Naomi found herself seated at a table with Vincent and several young environmental entrepreneurs from across Southeast Asia. The conversation flowed naturally, centered on strategies for scaling sustainable solutions without compromising community ownership. "The challenge," Vincent was saying, "is balancing necessary capital with authentic purpose. I learned the hard way that when financial metrics become the primary measure of success, mission drift is inevitable. But without financial sustainability, even the most noble purpose fails," countered Lin Wei, a young woman developing solar solutions for remote communities in Borneo. "Exactly," Naomi interjected. "That's why we need to develop new metrics that capture holistic value creation, environmental, social, and financial." The discussion continued, energetic but respectful, with Vincent demonstrating a nuanced understanding that surprised Naomi. As the evening concluded, she found herself walking beside him along the illuminated promenade, Esteban engaged in conversation, several paces ahead with other participants. "You've changed," she observed simply. Vincent glanced at her, then returned his gaze to the spectacular skyline across the harbor. "I'm trying to, not always successfully." "Change isn't a destination," Naomi replied. "It's a practice." He nodded, accepting this wisdom. "There's a question I've wanted to ask since London, but I wasn't sure if I had the right." Naomi raised an eyebrow, curious but cautious. "Are you happy?" Vincent asked quietly. "Not just successful or respected or accomplished, though you're clearly all those things, but genuinely content with the life you've created." The question touched her unexpectedly, not because it was difficult to answer, but because it revealed how far they had both traveled from the people they had once been. "Yes," she said with simple certainty. "Not because everything is perfect, but because I'm fully present in my own story. The work challenges me, my relationships sustain me, and my purpose guides me." She looked at him directly. "Are you?" Vincent considered this with unexpected thoughtfulness. "Getting closer. I'm learning to measure success by contribution rather than acquisition. It's a significant recalibration." "Worth the effort, though," Naomi suggested, without question. His smile held a trace of his old charm, but without its former calculation. "Thank you, Naomi. Not just for this conversation, but for refusing to become bitter when you had every right. Your grace has been instructive. They had reached the end of the promenade where their paths would diverge. Vincent to his hotel, Naomi and Esteban to continue discussions with symposium participants at a nearby venue. I should rejoin my husband, Naomi said, glancing ahead to where Esteban waited patiently, deliberately giving them space to conclude their conversation. Vincent nodded in understanding. Of course. He extended his hand formally, as though marking the transition from their personal history to a new, more appropriately distanced relationship, to continued success in all its forms. Naomi accepted the handshake, appreciating the gesture's significance. For both of us. As she walked away to join Esteban, she felt a sense of completion that transcended vindication. The circle that had begun with betrayal had somehow transformed into a catalyst for growth, not just for her, but perhaps for Vincent as well. Everything all right? Esteban asked quietly as she took his arm. Naomi glanced back once to see Vincent watching them, his expression reflective rather than resentful. She turned back to her husband, to her present, to the future they were building together. Yes, she said with genuine contentment, everything is exactly as it should be. They continued along the waterfront, their conversation turning to the Foundation's next initiatives. Behind them, Singapore's skyline glittered against the night, a testament to human ambition, for better and worse. Before them stretched possibilities yet unimagined, pathways of purpose waiting to be discovered. Naomi walked forward without looking back again, her steps sure and her heart at peace. The story that had begun with heartbreak had evolved into something far more meaningful than mere redemption. It had become a journey of authentic transformation, proof that sometimes the greatest gift we receive is not getting what we once thought we wanted, but discovering what we truly need. In that discovery lay not just personal healing, but the potential to create ripples of positive change extending far beyond individual lives. This, Naomi had come to understand, was the true measure of wealth. Not what you accumulate for yourself, but what you enable others to become.